This is the Citroen C4, and it's a car that's quite hard to define.
It's about the size of a family hatchback like a VW Golf, but the pumped up wheel arches and elevated seating position are more like an SUV, but that roofline is like a coupe. Plus, to further complicate matters, you can have it as a petrol, diesel, or as a fully electric e-C4.
In this review, we're going to unpick exactly what this car is, and we're going to tell you if it's any good or not. We're also going to discuss the competitors that you could consider as an alternative to the C4, and if you do want to buy one, we're going to tell you the best way to spec it. But before we start, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you can see all of our new car reviews, and don't forget that whatcar.com is the place to go if you want a great deal on your next new car. Now, the C4 technically replaces two cars in Citroen's lineup, the slightly wacky C4 Cactus and the much more anonymous C4 hatchback. But the resulting car here has quite a distinctive look, doesn't it? Now, this front end is fairly similar to other new Citroen products, and it's got this distinctive V-shaped LED headlight design as well, and every C4 gets LEDs as standard. You can pay a bit extra to get a flash of colour down here on this bit of trim and on the sides, but if you go for an e-C4, then the styling is absolutely identical to the fuel-powered version of this car. The only thing that really differentiates them are a few extra E badges on the outside.
So it is, subjectively speaking, quite interesting to look at. But what is the C4 actually up against? Well, if we're talking coupe SUVs, then you might also be looking at the Audi Q3 Sportback or the BMW X2. But the C4 is much cheaper than them. So it's more likely you'd be looking at this or a Ford Focus or a Golf, or maybe even a more traditionally shaped family SUV like the Mazda CX-30 or Skoda Karoq. And then as a fully electric car, it's up against the likes of the Kia e-Niro and VW ID3.
So in this broad spectrum of competitors, how does the C4's interior stack up? Well, this is definitely one of the best Citroen interiors yet. There's really good build quality, there's a nice mix of materials as well, and it might not have the kind of wacky design that you find in the C3 Aircross, but this logical, functional layout is very, very good and feels a bit more grown up than it does in that car as well. So yes, compare it to a Q3 Sportback or a BMW X2, and those cars do feel more plush inside, but they're much more expensive, so you would hope that that would be the case. And compared to more mainstream rivals, it's only really the Mazda CX-30 that feels classier inside than the C4, so it is impressive. You also, in every C4, get a 10-inch touchscreen, which is mounted nice and high up on the dashboard here. Now, it's not quite as user-friendly as rival systems that have a rotary dial controller that just means it's easier to use them on the move, but the fact that this screen's so high up means it's within easy reach, and you also don't have to take your eyes too far from the road to operate it if you need to while you're driving. Plus, you get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as standard. And down here, if we're talking about ease of use, you've got physical controls for the air conditioning, which is brilliant because while you're driving, it's much simpler to make an adjustment down here with these buttons and dials than it is if these controls were hidden within a fiddly touchscreen menu. So that is very good indeed. Now, the driving position is good, but you're actually lower than you are in basically every other SUV. So you shouldn't be buying this thinking that you're going to get a really lofty, high off the ground driving position, because yes, you're a little bit higher than you are in an X2 and in a Golf or a Focus, but compared to other SUVs, you really aren't that high at all. But still, fundamentally, there's nothing wrong with the driving position. It's very comfortable, there's lots of adjustment, everything lines up nicely. The one annoyance is that because you've got that rear spoiler on the back of the car, it splits the rear windscreen in two, so you've constantly got it in your view if you're looking out the back of the car, which is a bit annoying. But aside from that, it is fine in terms of all the ergonomics and the comfort up front. Plus, these seats are really comfortable. They're nice and squidgy. You get adjustable lumbar support as standard. It's just a shame there isn't a little bit more in the way of side support for when you're cornering. But there's loads of storage options up front as well. So under the central armrest, you've got a cubby hole, another cubby in front of that with two cup holders. You've also got this tray here, which acts as a kind of hidden compartment if you want to put valuables in it when you leave the car. Then there's wireless phone charging above that. And over here, along with a decent sized glove box, you've also, on every C4 apart from the entry-level model, got this storage tray for a tablet and a mount that actually comes out and means you can stick the tablet to it to keep your passengers entertained on long journeys.
By the way though, if you have an iPad Air 2 or a Galaxy Tablet A 1.5, you'll need to pay £100 to get a bigger case for it to fit on the mount.
Well, you've got loads of room for your feet under the seat in front, but in terms of legroom and headroom, it isn't quite so impressive in the back of the C4. I'm just under 6 foot, and you can see legroom is actually okay for me. It's just not amazingly generous, but if I sit up straight, then that's where you can feel the impact of that sloping roofline cutting into the headroom that's available, because my head is touching the roof lining just about back here, and it does feel a little bit cramped too. So you can fit 3 passengers in the back, but that really will be a squeeze. So really, there are quite a few other rivals that are more practical in terms of rear seat space for passengers. There's not really much clever bits to point out in the back here either. There's a couple of USB ports. There's also some ISOFIX mounts. You can pull the middle seat down to give you some cup holders and reveal the ski hatch as well. But apart from that, there's not really much going on back here. The boot is okay, but definitely not outstanding. So you can fit 5 carry-on size suitcases below the parcel shelf here. In an X2 you can fit 7, and even in a Focus you can fit 6. You do have a couple of tiny storage compartments either side of this main loading area, and also there's hardly any loading lip at the front. Plus, another good thing is that every C4 gets a height adjustable boot floor, which is handy. And also if you go for an eC4, then you get exactly the same capacity as you do in the fuel-powered C4, so there's no reduction to try and fit the battery in or anything like that. But what's the C4 like on the road? Now, if you've seen any other reviews of the C4 or looked at any of the advertising around this car, then you might have noticed that there's quite a big deal made over how comfortable the C4 is supposed to be. Is there any truth in that, or is it just marketing hype? Well, the suspension certainly is very soft. So the C4 glides over most road imperfections and does a really good job of cushioning you from ruts and potholes and things like that. And actually at high speeds, it does develop this nice kind of wafty sensation, which is very rare in the kind of cars that this is up against. But just because it's soft doesn't mean that it's the most comfortable car in the world, because it does come with some downsides. So for example, if you aren't on a very flat motorway, then the ride can be a bit bouncy. You can just feel a lot of vertical movement happening in the car, and that can get quite annoying. And similarly, there's a fairly big impact on the handling because of the softness. So if you turn into a bend at speed, then you have a pretty dramatic amount of body roll that comes with it. But the handling overall is fine. It's relatively sure-footed. The steering is accurate, but it's incredibly light, so it does take a bit of dialing into when you first get in the car. But overall, it doesn't take that long to work out that this is a car that's been engineered more towards comfort rather than sportiness. So if you're looking for something agile and really entertaining, then actually a lot of the traditional hatchbacks that the C4's up against will offer a little bit more for you in that department. But it certainly has its strengths on the road, and it's also impressively quiet in here.
It's very quiet too in the electric EC4. With that version of the car, you get a 50 kilowatt-hour battery, which has a claimed range of 217 miles. But in our testing, we found the range was closer to 140 miles, which isn't fantastic, but is similar to rivals in that price range, like the 39 kilowatt-hour versions of the e-Niro and Kona Electric. And if the range isn't of crucial importance to you, the EC4 benefits from all the other positive traits of the C4 we're driving today.
If it's a fuel-powered C4 that you're after, then you've got a few different options. So there's a 1.2 litre petrol, which is available with 4 different power outputs. And there's also a 1.5 litre diesel, which is available with 2 different power outputs. But which is the one that you should go for? And if you do want to buy a Citroen C4, what's the best way to spec it? Well, we'd go for the 1.2 PureTech 130. In the lineup, it isn't the cheapest engine, but it's still decent value and gives you pretty decent performance as well. Now, a lot of the time we recommend going for a manual gearbox instead of an automatic because it's cheaper. But in the case of the C4, we'd actually stump up the extra £1,400 and go for this automatic gearbox. The manual just isn't great. It's got an overly light clutch and a vague gear shift. The auto isn't perfect. It can be a bit jerky at parking speeds, but on the move, it's smooth. There's 4 trims to choose from, and we think the one that makes the most sense is Sense Plus. It gets everything that entry-level Sense gets, but adds a head-up display, a reversing camera, an extra charging port inside, LED interior lighting, plus it gets an alarm, which alarmingly is missing on the entry-level Sense trim. And for £23,000 in that spec, it is significantly cheaper than both the BMW X2 and the Audi Q3 Sportback, both of which start at more than £30,000. The only standard paint colour is white, so you'll definitely want to go for a £545 metallic paint option. There's also a premium £700 metallic paint option at the top of the range too. Beyond the paint, there aren't really that many options to add on this car, but one of the ones you might want to consider is keyless entry and start, which costs £300. There's also a Safety Pack Plus, which upgrades the AEB system so it can detect cyclists. But if you're going to spend £1,100 on that, then you're actually better off just going for Shine trim, because then you get that safety pack, as well as tinted rear windows, adaptive cruise control, a 360-degree camera, and keyless entry.
It is worth knowing the C4 only scores 4 out of 5 stars in the Euro NCAP crash test. The adult occupant protection score was particularly disappointing by class standards.
So, what do we judge this car against, and should you buy one? Well, if you're looking at the C4 as an alternative to traditional hatchbacks and SUVs, then the competition is incredibly strong. And yes, the C4 has its strengths, but it's difficult for this car to really stand out. But if you're specifically looking for a coupe SUV, you really want that swooping roofline, then that's where the C4 really does look like a great value option, because compared to its rivals, it's very well priced, and it's also comfortable, it's refined, and it's got a great interior. For even more information on the C4, go to whatcar.com, where you can also get a great deal on your next new car. If you've enjoyed this video, it'd be great if you gave it a like. Make sure you tell us what you think of the car in the comments below, and do hit the subscribe button so that you can see all of our new car reviews when they go live. Thank you very much for watching.